The last entity we're going to deal with is a trust. And actually, probably the best way to explain what a trust is and how it works is to look at something that's going on that you'll be hopefully a little bit familiar with from the papers. It'll be running over several years. And it's an example of a trust and the problems that can arise in a trust situation. But it also highlights the essence of the relationships in a trust. So to give us an understanding of trust, I think it would be useful to have a look at a situation involving a trust that's been quite talked about in the press and will be ongoing, and hopefully you can easily be familiar with some of the facts if you want to go back and understand what's going on. So the situation we're going to deal with involves Gina Rinehart, who, as we're making this, is Australia's richest person. And she's, I think, currently second in the world or first in the world, depending where the markets are in terms of wealth. Now, Gina was actually the child of a very famous Western Australian entrepreneur, Lang Hancock, and he was married to a lady, as often men are, Hope Margaret. Now, I just mentioned that because Lang, as part of his arrangements, set up the Hope Margaret Hancock Trust. So Lang sets up the trust. And what he does is he puts a whole whack of his assets into there. In fact, the ownership, a substantial proportion of the ownership of the company that he built over his lifetime. Now, he also, let's not forget, outside the trust, gave some of the company to Gina. Now, when he puts it in the trust, Lang setting up the trust becomes what's known as the settlor. Okay, so that's his role. He is the person who set up the trust, and now he no longer owns the assets. Okay. Instead, the assets of the trust are owned by the trustee. Okay, so now Gina is named as the trustee of the trust, and she is actually the ownership. Let's make the ownership red. Okay, so we can see we have this ownership trustee. However, Gina doesn't really own it for herself. She owns it, and let's make this green, on behalf of her children, Lang's grandchildren. So what Lang has set up is he said, okay, I'm going to give some money to my daughter, Gina, but I also want money to go through to my grandchildren. And the grandchildren are Hope, John, Bianca, and Ginia. Okay, so they're the four independent grandchildren. Now I don't know why Lang set it up this way, but that's how he set it up. It could be for tax reasons, could be he wants to give his grandkids a start in life and to make sure that one individual doesn't lose all the wealth of the company. So he does it through the trust. He makes the mother the trustee and says at some point these people are going to get the money. The use of this trust, this money, or the company, should be managed, the trust, the assets in here should be managed, right, for the benefit of the trustees. All of the income and all of the wealth from it should be going to the trust, to the beneficiaries, sorry, not the trustees, get your terminology right, Gavin, to the beneficiaries here. Okay? So you can see that it's quite a complex relationship. At the first level, we have the settlor, whose assets they really were, Lang and his company shares. What happens is he sets up this legal form, the trust. He makes Gina the legal owner, so she's actually the legal owner, and that means she can deal with these assets, but she can't deal with them for herself. She must deal with them for the children. And why do we have this on the front page of our papers and in court cases spending millions of dollars? It's all about the argument about whether Gina Rinehart was using these assets for the children's benefit and for what they would want, or whether she was using it for her own benefit and trying to protect the company that she's building. And that's essentially what the court case is about. Now, don't worry about the details of the court case. It's important for us to understand that we're dealing with someone, the settlor, who gives some assets to a trust. Okay, that trust is managed or overseen by a trustee who is the legal owner. So the trustee is the legal owner, but they're not the beneficial owner. So the people who should get the benefit of the trust are the beneficiaries, and they're different to the trustee. So that's the essence of the nature of a trust relationship. That's what's set out on this slide here. The key parties involved, knowing that it's not a separate legal entity that we have in place, and what we have legal ownership but not equitable or beneficial ownership. And that the trustee has this fiduciary duty to act in the interests of those beneficiaries. It's also worth noting that the trustee can be a company. It doesn't necessarily need to be an individual person. Now, because the trustee isn't getting the benefit of the trust, if they were to go broke or something goes wrong, what you find is that the creditors of the trustee can't get at the assets of the trust, even if they go bankrupt. While they're the owner, in inverted commas, they're not the beneficiary. So in bankruptcy, those assets will be protected for the beneficiaries. So because of that, trusts are used by families sometimes to protect wealth or to distribute wealth to family matters, or as a tax effective way of conducting business. Because you can split the income among several different people, it might bring down the marginal tax rates, for instance, is one reason that you'd do it. However, if you're going to set up a trust, there are lots of significant formalities as well as those high obligations, those fiduciary duties of a trustee. And we see that being borne out in the Rinehart case at the moment. So, in summary, the trustee has a fiduciary obligation to look after the trust property for the beneficiaries, and they distribute the income from the trust property to those beneficiaries. And that's our final business structure.